Hello Internet! A couple of years ago, I dazzled the web with a little video where I stood up for violent video games. Now, after a couple of years, I've come to love something which is also being criticized and prosecuted by many. MMA. Dramatic effect. I'm relatively new to the world of MMA, having only learned of the sport 3 years ago, so I might not be able to intelligently defend the sport to the same degree I could with video games. But regardless, I'll do my best to try. For those of you unaware of the sport, MMA, or mixed martial arts, is a combat sport where two fighters face each other in a cage. Each respective fighter is meant to be knowledgeable in different styles of fighting, such as Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, boxing, Muay Thai, karate, Taekwondo. Well, you get the picture. It has grown in popularity in recent years, and it has been the subject of much praise and criticisms. Many detractors of MMA have bashed the sport by labeling it as human cockfighting. The worst part is that many critics aren't too wrong on their views. See, while no-holds-barred matches aren't anything new to the world, the UFC only came into existence in 1993. Back then, the idea was simply to place fighters from a respective style and put them in bouts to determine which style was the best. To accomplish this, they included bare-knuckled fights and hardly any rules outside of no biting and no eye gouging. In its inception, MMA wasn't a sport, and as a fan of MMA, I can fully admit this. When the UFC started to grow in popularity, it became more about spectacle than skill, with some fighters having little to no fighting record or experience at all. In fact, one fight was between a professional fighter and a cab driver. The fuck? Seeing this, it's no surprise that people viewed the UFC as nothing more than human cockfighting. Because, in many ways, it sort of was. Despite this, as the years progressed, the UFC started to include rules and regulations and basically invented what we now call MMA. Rather than each fighter using a single style, they all implement a little bit of everything, hence the mixed in mixed martial arts. Regardless, people still have trouble seeing MMA as a sport and instead focus on the brutality of it. Like I said, I'm new to MMA, but I've come to quickly love and understand it better the more I view it. And because I understand it better, I can understand many of the reasons why people have a problem with MMA. The first is, unfortunately, its origin. While I can defend MMA today, I can't defend how the UFC was back in the mid-90s. Back then, these criticisms seemed to be very well justified. I do think it's a problem that a lot of people can't let go of the past and simply see the greatness of the sport, because now it is a sport. It has rules, it has restrictions, and there is a technical aspect to make sure the sport is its own. Others cite the alleged brutality of the bouts, not because of the blood, because God knows boxing already has enough of that, but because of the ground and pound aspect. Take, for instance, this clip of what is probably the greatest knockout ever.
Now they're starting to open up. Vitor looking for the big left hand.
Outstanding head movement by Anderson.
Like we said, second to none.
He front kicked him in the face.
Absolutely right, trying to finish. It is all over.
Kick to the face.
Anderson Silva.
A lot of people find that this type of behavior is not sportsmanlike, and that it is a sign of how vicious and mean the fighters are. There is a reason most people have a problem with this, and to me, it's because they still have a boxing mentality. Very few people seem to comprehend that MMA is a hybrid combat sport that includes both stand-up and ground fighting. So to anyone watching this video, contrary to popular belief, when the guy is down, it doesn't mean he is out. This is something that people can't seem to grasp. Yes, In the clip I showed you, Vitor Belfort was clearly knocked out. But not every punch or kick will knock a guy out. There are fighters out there who can really take a punch, and a lot of them rely on their ground game to defend themselves when they fall down. I've seen fighters fall to the ground and manage to quickly defend themselves once the other guy tries to finish him. So yes, while it may seem brutal, this type of thing is necessary. Because unlike boxing, the last thing you want is to allow the guy to get back on his feet. Although, in boxing, you probably wouldn't want that either, but there's nothing you can do about it. But anyway, moving on. The beauty of the sport is that anything can happen. Thanks to judo and Brazilian jiu-jitsu, fighters can learn different ways of kicking ass while having their backs on the floor. In boxing, these things aren't allowed because grappling and ground techniques aren't part of that sport. Well, they're part of this one. And unless the guy is clearly unconscious, there's no reason not to ground and pound him. And the truth is, this is how a real fight would be. And that is also another great aspect of MMA. It's realism. First, because it's not like fake pro wrestling. And second, because it doesn't limit itself to a single aspect of fighting. Bruce Lee, for example, never liked to compete in tournaments because he said it restricted how a real fight would be. Now, undoubtedly, he would have probably enjoyed how the UFC was in its inception, but nowadays, maybe he wouldn't think too much of MMA. Still, MMA is as close as you can get, while at the same time being a sport. In a real fight, I won't knock the guy down and hope he's out or wait for him to get back up. If I have to, I'll launch myself on the bastard and start beating the ever-loving shit out of him. But honestly, the best thing about MMA isn't the fighting, but something much more profound than that. I've had a lot of time to think, and to me, as an MMA fan, MMA is a unification of cultures. Think about it. As a race, there are very few things we've got in common, or at least as cultures, except, well, maybe two things: sex and fighting. Sports like baseball and American football may be popular in the US, but in South America, very few care for it. Okay, scratch that. In my country, a lot of people love baseball. But anyway, fighting, on the other hand, is something we can all relate to as a culture. Of course, not everyone likes fighting, but culturally speaking, like I said, it's something everyone shares. Every culture in the world has a certain way of fighting that exists for a particular reason, be it self-defense, for sport, or in terms of philosophy. Each style is a representation of its culture and of a certain way of thinking. What's so great about MMA is that it breaks the boundaries and says, hey, we're all one and the same, and we can all learn a little bit from each other to be better. As I trained in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, I learned a little bit of the history of the martial art and the history of the Gracie family. Then I started to learn about Muay Thai and its history, as well as karate's history and boxing's history. Learning a little bit about each philosophy and each sport and each culture as I explored a little bit on each martial art. I said each a little too much, didn't I? Anyway, this sport is something we can all relate to because it has something of every culture. I don't believe boxing will die out because boxing is an essential part of MMA, as is each style of fighting. They all bring something new to the table, and all of them are representatives of their respective country. I'm sure not every fighter, or everyone for that matter, will see it this way. Not everyone wants to hold a rank in any martial art, and some simply learn the skills so that they can be better at fighting. Okay, that's fine. But personally, I like to see MMA as a coming together of various cultures and diversities, and seeing what each of them have to offer. There are a lot of fighters who embody great sportsmanship and respect, men who show true dedication in not only their training but their discipline. These guys, to me, are the real MMA fighters. The ones who look at each style and blend a little bit of everything. The ones who learn to adapt the skills to themselves and not the other way around. The one who, despite the fact that he's going to ground and pound you, he'll still shake your hand, he'll make sure you're okay. These are the real martial artists. A lot of people think that MMA is also sort of distorted the view of martial artists, and it's true. Not every fighter has that respect. Not every fighter has that discipline. But that doesn't mean that all of them are the same. And that's why I love MMA, because it's full of surprises. Because just because a guy falls down doesn't mean he lost. Because the smaller guy can beat the bigger guy. Because anything can happen. Because it's as close to reality as you can get. And because, to me, it's a coming together of the best each culture has to offer. Well, thanks for watching this video. And I'll leave this one quoting Dana White. Fighting is in our DNA, we get it, and we love it. Thank you.